Tonight, the map splits in two. On one side, Texas drills. On the other, Alberta sells the wind. This is not a metaphor, it's a ledger. Rigs in the Permian punch deeper for marginal barrels. North of the border, 3,000 new turbines flip on kilowatt hour after kilowatt hour, flooding a grid that chose planning over swagger. Donald Trump mocked climate policy as a fan club of Greta. He promised cheap fuel, patriotic oil, victory by pipeline. But the numbers are not sentimental. Power bills are. Factory margins are. And tonight, U.S. companies are buying clean electricity from Canada because it's cheaper, steadier, and increasingly legally safer to use. Look at the contradiction. Energy dominance, he said. The reality is dependence on volatile oil prices, on OPEC headlines, on refinery outages, on hurricanes in the Gulf. Texas just permitted hundreds of new wells. That creates headlines, not certainty. Alberta commissioned thousands of turbines. That creates capacity. Every blade that turns sells a promise. American politicians still dismiss lower operating costs over time and fewer shocks at the meter. The market understands what the slogans will not. When fuel is free, scale wins. Listen to a plant manager in Dallas, call her Maria Alvarez, whose fabrication line runs aluminum presses and laser cutters. Her electricity bill is her second biggest cost after labor. During the last price spike, she cut a shift. She doesn't attend rallies, she reads invoices, she signed a virtual power purchase agreement tied to Canadian wind. Her bankers liked the hedge. Her workers liked keeping hours. Her comment is simple. I need stable power at a stable price. I don't need tweaks. The policy logic on the Trump side never added up. Drill more, flood the market, claim victory. But U.S. oil is sold into a global barrel, priced by global events, financed by global capital. Meanwhile, electricity is local, regional, intertied. Trump deregulated pipelines and sneered at transmission lines. He swung hammers at solar tariffs and shot barbs at EV mandates. While the single most boring, most consequential piece of the transition, long-distance wires, stayed starved. Canada invested. Provinces planned corridors and storage. The payoff is showing up in cross-border contracts that don't care about culture wars. Watch the labor politics flip. Trump promised oil field jobs. Yes, some returned. Then rigs paused when prices dipped. Boom, bust, repeat. Wind crews in Alberta are not immune to cycles, but their fuel bill is zero. Their output is contracted. Their financiers are pension funds, not speculators chasing war premiums. American workers watch this from across an invisible line and ask why the jobs president couldn't build a 21st century grid with them, not around them. Why he framed climate as an insult, not an industrial strategy. There's also the corporate math. CFOs don't worship ideology, they worship basis points. Procurement teams chase the cheapest megawatt hour that meets compliance rules from investors, insurers, and customers. Many of those rules now flag carbon intensity, physical risk, and legal exposure. A Canadian wind PPA checks boxes. A Texas peaker plant on a hot August day does not. Under Trump's posture, companies were told to choose loyalty over arithmetic. Under the balance sheet, arithmetic won. And the geopolitics? Trump wrapped fossil fuels in a flag and called it sovereignty. But dependence on swing producers and storm seasons is not sovereignty. A continent with interoperable grids and diversified sources is. Canada knows this. The European Union knows this. Even red state utilities quietly know this, signing renewables because they pencil out even when the press releases say otherwise. The culture war made energy a team sport. The bills made it a market. Cue the soundbite that didn't age well. Wind only works when the wind blows. The turbines in Alberta turn more hours than the joke credits, and they pair with hydro reservoirs that act like giant batteries. That is engineering, not a meme. Meanwhile, Texas has wind too, some of the best, plus sun. What it lacks is a federal strategy and interstate ambition that survived Trump's theatrics. He turned transmission into a footnote. Canada turned it into a business plan. So here is the headline you won't hear at a rally. America drills, Canada invoices. One path digs deeper into volatility and court battles over leases, rights of way, and emissions. The other spins capital into projects that deliver predictable cash flows and lower rates. When Trump laughed at climate policy, he laughed at the cheapest power plant you'll never fuel. He mistook volume for value, noise for capacity, and culture for cost curves. Markets are now grading that mistake in real time, and the politics will follow the bills. Voters don't read white papers in August when the grid is strained. They read their statements. If the cheapest kilowatt hour crosses the border with a maple leaf on it, that's where purchasing managers will go. If the loudest politician offers pride without price relief, that's where patience will end. While America drills, Canada sells the wind. The switch is already on. Start with the meter. A kilowatt hour in West Texas spikes when heat slams the grid. A kilowatt hour from Alberta's wind, backed by hydro, lands at a contract price that doesn't flinch. Industrial buyers know the difference. They want fixed. They want firm. They want legal cover for the decade ahead. Under Trump, energy was a stage prop. Under finance, it's a liability line. That gulf is where the story turns. Meet the counterpart to Maria Alvarez, Daniel Cho, head of energy procurement for a Midwestern data center operator. His servers can't sweat. His investors can't explain outages to customers paying for 5 nines. Trump told him that fossil fuels are reliable. The grid told him otherwise. Price shocks, forced outages, regulatory whiplash. Daniel signed a cross-border long-term virtual PPA indexing to Canadian wind with hydro shaping. He did the math in silence. His comment is drier than politics. We hedge risk, not culture. Cross the border on paper. You see engineering, not ideology. Wind in Alberta peaks when cold fronts drive capacity factors higher. Hydro reservoirs in British Columbia and Manitoba modulate output, interties, smooth flows. Congestion rents become spreadsheets, not slogans. It's not glamorous. It works. America could do the same at continental scale. Trump chose not to. He mocked the parts of the system that actually tame volatility. Transmission, storage, demand response, planning. He preferred the parts that make headlines, leases, rigs, ribbon cuttings. Look at labor again, but with a harder lens. Oil patch jobs are skilled, proud, essential. They also track global cycles and debt-laden drill schedules. Wind and grid jobs are skilled, proud, essential, and tied to multi-year construction with pension capital and regulated returns. Under Trump, the federal government treated these as opposites in a zero-sum spectacle. In reality, the same iron workers can hang blades. The same electricians can pull wire for substations. The same welders can build towers and tanks. Policy decides whether their tools chase a swing price or a multi-decade asset. Canada bet on the latter. Workers noticed. Now the corporate governance layer. Banks and insurers have moved the goalposts. They didn't ask permission from talk radio. They wrote covenants. They priced risk. They required emissions baselines and resilience plans. A wind PPA with firming looks like compliance and prudence. A gas peaker without carbon controls looks like a footnote in a lawsuit. Trump shouted, drill, drill, drill. Lenders whispered, disclose, disclose, disclose. The whisper won. CEOs don't say it on stage. They sign it in term sheets. Trump's camp insists renewables need subsidies. Here's the quieter truth. Every system is subsidized by rules. Zoning is a subsidy. Liability shields are subsidies. Federal mineral rights are subsidies. Externalized climate and health costs are the largest subsidies of all. The question isn't whether support exists, it's what you buy with it. Canada bought transmission corridors, storage strategies, workforce pipelines, export capability. Trump bought grievance, court fights over leases, and yet another round of emergency market interventions when heat or cold hit hard. That is not strategy, that is panic on delay. Consider manufacturing. A steel mill in Ohio wants price certainty and green credentials for European customers. It cannot afford to be a villain to its buyers or a hostage to spiking power. So it pairs on-site efficiency with off-site Canadian wind and a certificate regime its auditors accept. Emissions fall on paper and in practice. Costs glide downward. Trump framed this as betrayal. The plant manager framed it as survival. He'll keep a line open and keep people paid. That's the ideology that matters on payday. Zoom out to geopolitics, minus the theatrics. Allies coordinate, markets integrate, resilience emerges from diversity, not purity. Trump confused flags with electrons. He called Canadian power foreign while ignoring that it is also continental, regulated, neighborly, and cheap. He adored domestic oil, yet sold it into a global market that does not salute. His approach produced maximum noise with minimum security. Canada's produced minimum noise with measurable resilience. Business prefers the latter. Families do too when the bill arrives. There is a legal dimension, and it will bite. Climate risk disclosure is no longer a think tank hobby. It is compliance. Failing to plan is not only expensive, it is negligent. A portfolio strapped to volatile fuels without mitigation is a case study for directors' liability. Trump's rhetoric invited boards to ignore this. Canada's policies made it easier to meet it. The capital followed, not out of virtue, out of fear. Finally, the culture war tax. Every time Trump turned energy into a loyalty oath, he added friction to practical decisions. Permitting slowed. Transmission became a proxy fight for identity. Engineering talent defected to firms and countries that promised to build, not litigate theater. Alberta's pivot is not perfect, it is decisive. Texas has the resource, the will, and the workforce to dominate clean power. What it lacks is an all of the above grid strategy free from one man's applause lines. That absence has a price, and tonight it is being paid to Canada. So yes, America drills. Rigs glow at dusk. Photos look strong. But the invoice tells the truth. Companies are locking 10-year contracts for wind shaped by water, crossing a friendly border on electrons and law. Trump called that weakness, it looks like discipline. It looks like the grown-up table. And it is happening while the microphones still argue. The future isn't waiting for a catchphrase. The turbines are already spinning. Follow the money, then follow the wires. The oil boom sells barrels to a world that sneezes when war breaks out or shipping lanes clog. The wind boom sells megawatt hours to a neighbor through contracts that outlast news cycles. That's the structural split. Trump campaigned on dominance. Markets answered with basis risk. Canada engineered around it. Intertees, storage, capacity markets that reward availability instead of slogans. The result is not utopia. It is fewer surprises. CFOs can price fewer surprises. That alone moves billions. On the ground, the incentives tell the story. A Texas driller borrows against a curve shaped by geopolitics and storms. A Canadian wind developer signs a 12-year offtake with hydro-firming and a penalty clause for underdelivery measured in hours, not headlines. One business trains for volatility, the other trains for compliance and uptime. Trump framed the first as rugged realism. In practice, it is roulette with a patriotic soundtrack. The second is boring. Boring wins in procurement. Meet a union voice. Angela Ruiz, transmission lineman, local steward. She supported projects that pay middle class wages and keep crews home instead of chasing boom towns. Under Trump, she watched high voltage lines turn into partisan punching bags. Permits stalled, lawsuits multiplied, contractors delayed mobilization because nobody knew if the line would ever clear court. In Alberta, she sees crews advancing tower by tower, deadlines tight, penalties real, cash flows predictable. Build the line sounds simple. Under Trump's politics, it wasn't. Under Canada's planning, it is a job description. Listen to a rural mayor, Ethan McKay, from a town 3 hours outside a major U.S. load center. He wants industry. He wants tax base. He wants lights that don't flicker when factories ramp. He pitched a substation upgrade and a link to a regional clean supply. He got speeches about oil pride and federal overreach, then a summer of rolling conservation alerts when a cross-border wind contract offered stable prices and a small training grant for local electricians. He signed the letter of support. He'll cut the ribbon quietly. He'll welcome paychecks loudly. Trump's brand could not keep his water tower lit at 7 p.m. in July. A spreadsheet could. There is also the investor language, cold and final. Weighted average cost of capital drops when revenue is predictable and risk is mitigated. Wind plus hydro firming plus enforceable interconnection equals predictability. Oil plus politics plus extreme weather equals a risk premium. This is not a moral sermon, it is math. Boards don't declare that on cable hits. They write it in the discount rate and walk away from projects that can't clear it. Trump demanded applause. Capital demanded bankability. Only one of those signatures keeps turbines spinning and data centers humming. Consider the legal overlay that Trump dismissed as red tape, grid codes, cybersecurity rules, reliability standards, environmental constraints. These define what counts as firm. Under that regime, intermittent resources become dependable through portfolios, storage, and contracts. Canada scaled that framing. Provinces fit pieces together. Trump mocked the engineering and litigated the permitting. He promised yesterday's certainty while delivering tomorrow's outages. Companies don't forget outages. The memory is logged in SLA penalties and churned customers. Now, the consumer layer. Households don't shop fuel mixes, they shop bills. When rates spike, the political narrative collapses. Under Trump's performative certainty, families learned a hard truth. Ideology does not cool a bedroom at midnight during a heat wave. The neighbor selling wind backed by water did. That neighbor's grid also invested in efficiency programs that lower peak demand. Boring again, effective again. This is how culture war loses to kilowatt hour arithmetic. The international optics flipped next. Trump raged at allies while preaching independence, then tied America's energy economics to imported price shocks. Canada, mocked as green, built exports that cushion its own bills and attract U.S. buyers. On the world stage, that's soft power with receipts. It also undercuts Trump's recurring claim that climate policy means weakness. The weakness is paying more for less reliability because you confused drilling with de-risking. The strength is selling stability to your neighbor. Enter small business America, the part supposedly protected by fossil swagger. A refrigerated warehouse in Oklahoma City, a machine shop outside Phoenix, a hospital microgrid in Missouri. Each bought hedges, demand response, or imported clean contracts to calm volatility. They did it without press conferences. They did it because Trump-era theatrics made planning impossible. The quiet migration toward cross-border clean power isn't ideology. It's survival with a ledger attached. What would a serious American strategy look like? Connect regions, overbuild clean capacity where it's cheapest, firm it with hydro, batteries, and demand flexibility. Permit lines like they matter because they do. Pay workers to build 20 years of backbone, not 2 years of headlines. Texas could lead that tomorrow with federal muscle and state pragmatism. Under Trump, it didn't because the cameras preferred Derek's. The result is today's news. Companies contracting out of the culture war and into Canada's grid. This isn't a story about perfection north of the border. Alberta has controversies, curtailments, politics. But compared to Trump's noise, the Canadian approach traded vibes for voltage. That is why the invoice runs north to south. That is why procurement desks keep signing. And that is why the drill forever promise is losing in the only arena that counts at scale, the monthly bill. America can keep drilling. Canada will keep selling the wind. One of those is a stunt. The other is a system. Here's the part the slogans skip. Tariffs don't power factories. Electrons do. Trump sold tariffs as industrial revival, then left manufacturers exposed to two prices he couldn't bully: global oil and real-time power. When diesel rose, logistics bled. When heat spiked, kilowatt hours jumped. Canada's wind, paired with hydro and contracts, sliced through both vulnerabilities. That's why procurement chiefs now treat cross-border clean power like a supply chain input, not a virtue signal. The invoice reads renewable, the CFO reads predictable, and the plant manager reads no shutdowns at 3 p.m. Culture war has no line item for that. Watch how the accounting spreads. A semiconductor fab in Arizona needs 24/7 uptime. It cannot explain voltage dips to customers building medical devices. Under Trump's posture, reliability meant repeating the word baseload and hoping weather behaved. Under engineering, reliability means portfolios, storage, and intertees. The fab's lawyers review force majeure clauses and see fewer excuses accepted by buyers. The fab's bankers review ESG covenants and see hard triggers tied to emissions intensity. The Canadian PPA clears both. The old model clears neither without prayers and exemptions. Policy is a sermon. Contracts are a sentence. Trump's defenders insist America has plenty of wind and sun. True, and Texas proved it. But the leap from resource to resilience runs through governance, transmission easements, market design, interregional planning. Trump spent political capital rolling back car standards while transmission applications rotted. He yelled at offshore wind while gas plants tripped under cold snaps. He framed electrification as elitist while making power more fragile. Canada did the boring opposite. Result, exporters of stability on a continent hungry for it. Consider a utility CEO in the Midwest testifying to a commission. She's not there to debate hashtags. She's there to justify a resource plan that keeps hospitals and factories whole. Trump-era guidance treated climate rules as an enemy. Lenders and reinsurers now treat climate risk as a balance sheet event. The CEO's job is to square those constraints with physics. She hedges seasonal peaks with wind imports shaped by hydro reservoirs. She pairs that with local solar and demand response. Ratepayers get fewer spikes. Shareholders get fewer surprises. Politicians get fewer talking points because fewer crises erupt on cue. Labor economics tilt further. Oil field jobs are heroic. The rallies say so. But the revolving door of boom and bust breaks mortgages and school calendars. Grid jobs and renewable construction tilt toward multi-year schedules and union pathways that stack certifications into raises. Under Trump, the message to these workers was whiplash dressed as pride. Under Canada's export strategy, the message is schedule and scale. Show up, build, advance. American crews can do this. Nobody doubts that. They just need a national plan that's louder than a rally and quieter than a panic order when the grid buckles. Now, supply chains. Wind turbines and batteries arrive with their own political baggage. Trump's answer was tariffs and scorn. The market's answer is localization where possible and diversification where necessary, then contracts that price risk instead of pretending it doesn't exist. A Canadian developer bundles components from allied suppliers, locks in currency hedges, and sells certainty across the border. Meanwhile, U.S. industrial buyers discover that foreign stability beats domestic volatility when you're shipping goods under penalty clauses to customers who don't forgive outages. Loyalty to a speech doesn't cover liquidated damages. Regulators are not neutral in this. Disclosure regimes are maturing. Directors' duties are sharpening. Utilities and corporates that ride volatility without mitigations risk lawsuits after blackouts and price spikes. Trump mocked this apparatus as bureaucratic harassment. Investors describe it as modern fiduciary duty. The divergence matters. It channels capital towards systems that document resilience. Canada built documentation into design. America, under Trump, built denial into press conferences and prayed the weather wouldn't grade the lie. There's a consumer truth beneath the corporate chessboard. Big rooms get cool when the grid is strong. Small kitchens stay warm when bills are sane. The family budgeting at a laminate table does not parse rhetoric about dispatchable capacity. They parse due dates. When Canadian wind lowers wholesale prices during peak hours and those savings make it through to retail, that family notices. When ideology lifts bills, they notice faster. The campaign slogan promises control. The thermostat reports reality. Every time the two diverge, another household stops buying the act. Imagine an American reset that ditches theatrics. Connect Texas sun and wind to the Midwest load with steel in the ground. Build storage like a public works project. Clear permits with time limits and compensation, not endless injunctions. Treat interties with Canada as strategic assets, not talking points. Train oil field veterans for grid construction at scale and pay them price resilience, measure it, publish it. Under Trump, that blueprint was heresy. Under markets, it is common sense with a payback. Trump keeps returning to a line about strength. Strength isn't shouting at turbines. Strength is delivering power through heat domes and cold snaps without price panic. Strength is a factory shift that ends on time because a spreadsheet hedged risk months ago. Strength is continental planning with allies who share standards and values. Canada, derided as soft, built that strength. America, under Trump's show, rented it. The bill is in dollars and dignity. The longer we ignore it, the more we pay financially, strategically, and politically. So the headline holds: America drills harder. Canada sells the wind smarter. One is theater with flares at dusk. The other is infrastructure with invoices at month's end. If you work for a living, the second keeps your hours. If you invest for a living, the second lowers your risk. If you govern for a living, the second keeps you off the evening news. All that remains is a choice. Cling to a performance that fails in heat, or build a system that hums when the cameras leave. The market already chose. The grid already knows. The rest is catching up. Here's the final image: a map at night. The southern half glows in amber oil rigs, refineries, flares, motion without memory. The northern half glows in blue turbines, transmission lines, quiet power moving south through wires. Same continent, different century. Donald Trump still shouts about dominance, but the lights tell a different story. The country that drilled deeper is paying more. The one that built smarter is selling stability. This isn't a climate sermon. It's a market obituary for a strategy that mistook noise for policy. Under Trump, America doubled down on extraction, betting that the world would always need what it digs. Canada bet on what the world needs to run. One sells barrels that expire with each headline. The other sells electrons, renewed by physics every dawn. One fights yesterday's war for energy independence. The other quietly cashes checks for energy interdependence. The irony couldn't be clearer. Trump mocked Greta Thunberg and the wind cult, but those turbines now power the factories his tariffs couldn't save. He vowed to make America great again through oil. Instead, he made Canada rich through logic. The border didn't move. The balance sheet did. The U.S. didn't lose its resources. It lost its priorities. $1 trillion in infrastructure, technology, and export potential traded for applause and nostalgia. Ask yourself, who won the energy war? The country burning cash to prove dominance, or the neighbor exporting cheap, clean power into that pride? America's biggest vulnerability under Trump was never oil dependence. It was ego dependence. He turned energy into a mirror for emotion, not an instrument for resilience. Markets saw through it. Workers paid for it. Now even the oil states are installing wind faster than the White House can deny climate math. The verdict is live on every utility dashboard. Each turbine in Alberta spins once for profit, twice for proof. Proof that pragmatism outlasts populism. Proof that leadership is measured in stability, not slogans. And proof that when America drills deeper into the past, its neighbors quietly build the future. When the lights dim in Texas, they won't fade to black. They'll glow faintly blue, powered by wind that Trump once laughed at. The invoice will cross the border. The irony will cross with it. And in the silence after the rally chants, one fact will hum through every cable: Canada flipped the switch first.